son. The music started, and something changed. She was sitting in her university lecture hall, headphones in, the notes of a piano piece washing through her ears. But she wasn't just hearing it, she was seeing it. Gold ribbons unfurling across her field of vision. Deep violet, where the low notes fell. A sharp, sudden red every time the melody peaked. She assumed everyone experienced this. She was 22 years old, and she had no idea that anything was wrong. Her name has not been disclosed in the published case literature, so we will call her by the name used in several documented accounts: Maya. Maya was a music student in her early 20s, living what appeared by every external measure to be an ordinary life. She was described by clinicians as high-functioning, academically successful, and socially engaged. She had grown up with colors accompanying sound for as long as she could remember. Certain words tasted like specific foods. The word cellar tasted to her like cold metal. The word Monday had the texture of rough fabric. For most of her childhood, she believed these experiences were universal, but they were not. When Maya was 19, she described her sensory experiences to a close friend. The friend did not know what she was talking about. Maya's first appointment with a general practitioner resulted in a referral for anxiety assessment. The documented records from that initial consultation note that the physician found no neurological red flags. A standard screen for mood disorder was administered. The results came back in the mild range. She was advised to monitor her stress levels, but the symptoms did not stop. Over the following 3 years, the experiences Maya had always lived alongside began to shift. They became louder, more intrusive, harder to separate from the world around her. Crowded spaces triggered cascades of overlapping color and sensation she could not filter. A busy cafeteria was not just noisy, it was visually overwhelming, tinged with uninvited tastes and textures she had not chosen. She began avoiding social situations. She withdrew from ensemble music performance, the very discipline she had built her academic life around. She stopped listening to music through speakers in shared spaces. She told one clinician, in documented testimony, "It stopped feeling like a gift. It started feeling like something I couldn't turn off." A second referral, this time to a neurologist, resulted in an MRI of the brain. The scan showed no structural abnormality. An electroencephalogram was performed. No seizure activity was detected. She was referred onward to a psychiatrist, who documented the presentation carefully. The psychiatric evaluation noted that Maya did not meet criteria for psychosis. Her perceptual experiences were consistent, cross-modal, and non-delusional, meaning she understood they were generated by her own nervous system, not by external forces. The psychiatrist noted in the case record that her presentation was atypical and did not fit neatly into existing diagnostic categories. For 3 years, every physician said a version of the same thing. "We can see that you are struggling. We are not sure what to call it." She went back to her small apartment. She sat in the dark, because in the dark, it was quieter, and she tried to explain to her family why she still had no answers, only a growing list of tests that had found nothing wrong. Now here's where the medical records become unusual. The neurologist who eventually received Maya's case had a specific interest in perceptual neuroscience. He had read published research on a condition that most general practitioners never encounter. He asked Maya a question no previous physician had thought to ask. When did the experiences stop feeling manageable? That question changed everything. The condition is called synesthesia. In the documented medical and psychological literature, synesthesia refers to a neurological phenomenon in which stimulation of one sense automatically triggers an experience in a second, unstimulated sense. The word comes from the Greek syn, meaning together, and aesthesis, meaning sensation. It is not a disease, it is not a hallucination, and it is far more common than most people realize. Studies indicate that synesthesia occurs in approximately 3 to 4% of the general population, though some researchers in science documentary and academic publishing contexts suggest the true figure may be higher, as many individuals never report their experiences. The most common form is grapheme-color synesthesia, in which letters and numbers carry consistent color associations. Maya's form was more complex. She experienced Chromesthesia, color responses to sound, and lexical-gustatory synesthesia, in which words trigger taste sensations. Both forms are documented in published literature, including research from the University of Edinburgh and case reports in neurological journals. Here is what made Maya's case medically significant. Synesthesia in most individuals is stable, consistent, and experienced as neutral or positive. Research published in the journal Cortex has documented cases in which synesthetic experiences become pathologically intrusive, described in the literature as synesthetic overwhelm, or, in some clinical frameworks, as a component of sensory processing disorder overlapping with synesthetic presentation. Clinicians noted that in Maya's case, the cross-modal associations had intensified significantly in her early 20s, a period consistent with documented reports of synesthetic experiences becoming more pronounced during periods of neurological or psychological stress. The mechanism is poorly understood. What researchers propose is that in some individuals, the neural cross-activation that produces synesthesia may interact with heightened sensory sensitivity in ways that amplify the perceptual load beyond the individual's capacity to filter it. The published literature also notes something that the medical system had missed in Maya's case for 3 years. Standard neurological and psychiatric workups are not designed to identify synesthesia. There is no blood test. There is no imaging marker. The condition is identified through structured interview and validated self-report instruments, tools that are not part of a routine referral pathway. One published review in Frontiers in Psychology observed that clinicians frequently misclassify synesthetic presentations as anxiety, dissociation, or early psychosis because the language patients use to describe their experiences sounds, to an untrained ear, like disordered perception. In Maya's case, the neurologist administered the synesthesia battery, a validated assessment tool developed by researchers including David Eagleman at Baylor College of Medicine, which confirmed the consistency and cross-modal nature of her experiences. The assessment also measured the degree of interference the experiences were causing in her daily functioning. The score placed her in a range that the documentation described as clinically significant. This was not because synesthesia is a disorder. It was because her particular sensory profile, in her particular environment, had exceeded what her nervous system could quietly process. And then came a finding that changed how physicians understood this. What this case illuminated was not a failure of individual physicians. It was a structural gap in the referral pathway. Synesthesia sits in an unusual position in medicine and psychology. It is not classified as a disorder in the DSM or ICD, yet some individuals with synesthetic perception experience genuine functional impairment. The documented case literature contains other patients whose experiences resemble Maya's. Years of unrecognized perceptual difference, followed by eventual distress, when the environment or stress load exceeded what they could manage. The treatment approach documented in Maya's case was not pharmacological. No medication was prescribed for the synesthesia itself, because there is currently no drug that alters cross-modal perception in a targeted way. Instead, her care team developed an environmental modification plan, structured reduction of high-stimulation settings, paced re-exposure to music in controlled conditions, and therapeutic work focused on cognitive reframing of the sensory experiences. A psychologist with a background in sensory processing co-managed her care. Over a period of approximately 18 months, the clinical notes document a meaningful reduction in the degree to which her synesthetic experiences interfered with daily functioning. She returned to music, not in the same way as before, but according to the records, she returned. What this case reveals about medicine is something the science documentary tradition has returned to again and again. The medical system is built to find what is absent: a tumor, a lesion, a chemical imbalance that falls outside a reference range. It is less well equipped to recognize what is simply different, until that difference becomes a crisis. Maya's synesthesia was not new. It had been present her entire life. What was new was the moment the world around her became too loud to absorb. Researchers still cannot fully explain why synesthetic intensity varies across a lifetime, why some individuals with the same neurological profile experience it as enrichment and others as interference, or what specific conditions cause cross-modal associations to amplify rather than remain stable. These remain open questions in published literature. What clinicians now note, in updated guidance from sensory neuroscience, is that asking patients about unusual perceptual experiences without immediately framing those experiences as pathology can open diagnostic doors that routine screening keeps closed. She was sitting in that lecture hall, gold ribbons across her vision, deep violet where the low notes fell. She thought everyone lived this way. She was not broken. She was not imagining it. She was simply wired in a way the medical system did not have a word for. Not until the right physician asked the right question, 3 years after she first tried to explain what her senses were doing. If you had spent 3 years being told there was nothing wrong, while knowing with absolute certainty that your experience of the world was not what anyone else described, would you have kept trying to find someone who believed you? This video is based on real, publicly documented medical case reports and is intended for educational and storytelling purposes. It is not medical advice. If you or someone you know is experiencing similar symptoms, please consult a licensed physician. Medical Mysteries. True cases every week.